Mom, you're becoming a real burden. Maybe it's time you figured out your own life. That's what my son said to me, his voice flat, his eyes never leaving the glowing screen of his phone. There was no anger in his tone, no cruelty, just indifference. I smiled, nodded, and quietly finished rinsing my coffee cup. What he didn't know was that within a month he'd be standing outside my mansion, my $2.3 million Charleston estate, asking if I could help him figure out his. My name is Margaret Carter, and I'm 70 years old. I've been living in the guest bedroom of my son David's suburban Phoenix house for nearly 3 years. But the real story started 4 years ago, the day I lost Robert, my husband, of 45 years. Robert died after an 8-month battle with cancer. I thought losing him would be the hardest thing I'd face. I was wrong. You see, Robert had always managed our finances. I was a retired school teacher with a small pension, and I trusted him entirely. But medical bills piled up like an avalanche. The insurance didn't cover the experimental treatments. We needed a special hospital bed, home care medications. It added up to $180,000 in debt. Then came the funeral. $15,000 more I didn't have. The mortgage on our house, $2,400. My pension went $800. I was drowning. A lot of widows face this. The grief is expected, the financial ruin. Not so much. You plan your whole life around growing old together, and suddenly you're growing old, alone in debt, and unsure of everything. That's when David stepped in. Mom, you can't keep living like this, he said, glancing around the house I raised him in. Sell it. Pay off the bills. Come stay with us. Sarah and I want you here, he added, squeezing my hand. You raised me alone after Dad left when I was 10. Let me take care of you now. Even Sarah chimed in. It would be a blessing, Margaret. Honestly, we could use the help. I'm drowning with the kids and work. The kids adore you, and they did, at the time. I said yes. There's a deep psychological weight carried by aging parents. Many feel torn between not wanting to burden their children and the desperate need for belonging. Margaret's decision wasn't just practical. It was emotional. It was trust. Mamu. The house sold for $340,000. After paying off debts and expenses, I had $127,000 left. I gave $75,000 to David for Emma's college fund. I gave $45,000 to help with their mortgage and expenses. I kept $7,000 for emergencies. Sarah actually cried. David hugged me tightly. You didn't have to do this, he said, but thank you. You'll always have a home with us. I moved into their guest room the next day. It was bliss. I became the early morning breakfast chef, the afternoon homework helper, the weekend cookie baker. Sarah said I was a lifesaver. David started every morning with coffee chats. Emma and Jake curled into my lap for bedtime stories. I was useful. I was loved. I belonged. At least for a while. They say money changes people. But what they don't tell you is how giving money freely from love can reveal who people really are. I remember the silence when I slid the 2 checks across the dining table. David stared at the first one, $75,000, made out for Emma's college fund. Mom, are you sure, he asked, but not in the way you ask someone because you're concerned. It was the tone of someone trying not to get too excited yet. I nodded, smiling gently. It's what your father would have wanted. Then I handed Sarah the second check, $45,000 made out to cover the mortgage and bills. You shouldn't, Sarah started. Her hands trembled, but she didn't push it back. She folded the check and slid it into her purse. David glanced at her. She glanced at him. And neither of them said, "We'll give it back when you need it." That was the first time I realized this wasn't a shared sacrifice. It was a silent transaction. Over dinner that night, no one brought it up again. Not a single word about the checks. Not even thank you. Just Emma chatting about school, Jake spilling juice, and Sarah smiling like nothing had happened. David said, "Pass the salt, Mom," like he hadn't just received my life savings in his hands. And so I passed it, both the salt and my silence, because I didn't want to embarrass them by expecting gratitude. I noticed it when they stopped asking me if I'd like to join them for walks. When the door would close just a little too quickly behind them. When Sarah started calling me Ma instead of Mom like I was staff. There were no harsh words, no dramatic scenes, just erasure. One night, I overheard Emma saying to her husband, "She means well, but she doesn't get our dynamic. She doesn't know when to give us space." I stood frozen in the hallway, a laundry basket and hand socks still warm from the dryer. I thought I was giving love. They thought I was imposing. It hurt. But I stayed quiet. Because mothers are supposed to be selfless, right? Because you're lucky they let you live with them, as my friend once said. That night I cried in the guest bathroom. Not from anger. From the sheer ache of being unnecessary. I once rocked Emma through fevers. Stayed up reading the same bedtime book 5 times in a row. I remember her tiny fingers gripping mine so tightly, like I was her whole world. Now she barely looks up from her phone. And when she does, her smile is thin polite, like I'm the mailman. But still, I bake, I fold, I smile. Because love doesn't just vanish, even when it's no longer welcome. Later that week, I overheard Sarah on the phone with her sister. "Yeah, Margaret gave us a pretty big gift," she whispered. "Well, not a fortune, but enough to breathe easier." Not a fortune. I lay awake that night staring at the ceiling. They hadn't asked for help. I'd volunteered. But their ease with my sacrifice unsettled me. I was folding laundry when I overheard it. The kids were watching TV. Sarah was in the kitchen. David was on the phone. He didn't know I was walking down the hall. "Yeah, man, it's nice having her here. Free childcare meals, house is always clean," he said, chuckling. "Sometimes she's too much, but it's worth it." I stopped. My hands tightened around the towel I was folding. Free childcare, meals, clean house. I wasn't a mother. I was a benefit. That night, I quietly set the table again, only 4 plates. David came in, grabbed a beer, sat down, didn't even look at me. I brought out dinner lasagna, his favorite. No comment. Not even a "thanks, Mom." He just said, "We're out of hot sauce." Like I was staff. Later that week, Sarah snapped at me in front of the kids. "Could you please not rearrange the pantry? I've spent hours organizing it." I had only moved a few boxes to make space for Emma's school snacks. I apologized. But inside, something wilted. It wasn't what they said. It was how easily they said it. As if my presence needed managing. As if kindness had expired. When I gave them money, their gratitude was short-lived. A month later, David said, "Mom, we've been meaning to ask. Could you maybe cover the water bill this month? Things are tight." I nodded. "Of course." Also, Sarah added, "Jake needs new soccer shoes. You're his grandma. That's kind of your thing, right?" "Kind of my thing." "No, thank you." "No, if it's okay. Just assumed." That night I sat in the guest room staring at the single chair in the corner. I'd sold my house, my space, my independence. And now I wasn't a mother or a guest. I was a line item in their budget. It started with the missing chair. At Sunday dinner, I walked out of the kitchen carrying a bowl of roasted vegetables, only to stop in my tracks. The dining table had 4 chairs: David, Sarah, Emma, and Jake. I stood there for a second too long. There used to be 5. I waited expecting someone to notice. No one did. Sarah was pouring juice. David was adjusting Jake's bib. Emma was already halfway through her pasta. "Where should I sit?" I finally asked, voice quiet. David looked up confused. "Oh, I thought you'd eaten earlier," he said. "You usually do." Sarah chimed in. "We didn't want to crowd the table, Mom." "You said your back hurts in these chairs." My back did hurt, but never enough to make me skip dinner with my family. At first, Marcus and Jessica were thrilled. I left sleeping pills on the table. I forgot keys in the fridge. I mistyped booking dates. I said I'm just getting old. My brain isn't what it used to be. Jessica quickly offered to help manage paperwork. Marcus secretly called the bank to check joint account status. But then, things didn't add up. I was weak, but everything still ran smoothly. I was forgetful, yet the B&B had glowing 5-star reviews. I was slow, but remembered every utility bill. Jessica started watching me longer when I accidentally dropped the spoon. She smiled, but her eyes didn't. Once I pretended to doze off in the living room. I heard Marcus whisper, "Don't you find it strange? She forgets things, but keeps the document room locked." Jessica replied, voice lowered, "Keep going. If she's bluffing, we'll catch her slip." They were afraid, not because I was strong, but because my weakness was strategic. Marcus started visiting less. Jessica stopped emailing, switched to calls with no voicemails. They checked rooms more thoroughly. Jessica suggested installing cameras, but her eyes scanned the ceiling first. Marcus asked, "Mom, are you recording these conversations?" I just smiled. I'm old. Who has time for that? But I knew they sensed something invisible but capable, of destroying everything they'd planned. A few days later, Emma had a school play, a big one, her first speaking role. I'd helped her memorize lines all week. We practiced in the hallway, acted out scenes together. I even altered her costume, just a few stitches on the sleeve so it would fit better. The night of the performance, I wore my nicest cardigan and curled my hair. I waited in the living room, purse on lap, watching the clock tick closer to 5:30. David walked in already in his coat. "Where's Emma?" I asked. "Oh, they already left. Sarah took her early. I'm coming with you." Right pause. "Ah, there's not enough room in the car." "Mom, Sarah's parents are coming too. You understand." I nodded. Of course I understood. "Oh." I watched the car pull away through the blinds. Then I sat back down. The silence in the house that night was louder than applause ever could be. I sat on the edge of my bed, holding the unopened envelope from Eleanor Whitmore. The name still felt distant, a shadow from a childhood I barely remembered. The last time I'd heard it was at my grandmother's funeral decades ago. Yet here it was, suddenly reappearing like a ghost with answers. I opened it. Inside was a simple letter written in elegant cursive on thick ivory paper. No lawyer jargon, no emotionless formality. Just this, dear Margaret. If you are reading this, it means I am gone. But I want you to know I have seen you. Your grace, your strength, the way you carry your family even when they forget to carry you back. You are not invisible. You are not unwanted. You are the last of us who remembers what dignity looks like. And that is why everything I leave behind the house, the accounts, the legacy, it's yours. Go live the life they made you forget you deserve. With love, Eleanor. Tears didn't fall right away. Instead, there was silence. The kind of silence that doesn't ache, it expands, opens something. In that stillness, I felt something shift. I wasn't just surviving, I was about to start over. Jen Olmos. Over the next week, I didn't tell anyone, but I watched. I noticed Sarah leaving more pamphlets around, one for a Sunrise Gardens assisted living with glossy photos of elderly people smiling in fake comfort. David started asking more questions, pretending to care. How are you sleeping, Mom? Wouldn't it be nice to have your own space? You deserve peace, you know. The translation was clear. Leave. But I didn't argue, because I was already gone in my mind, in my resolve. That Saturday, Sarah accidentally made exactly 4 pancakes. Jake asked where mine was. Sarah smiled. Grandma doesn't eat much breakfast anymore, sweetie. No one questioned her. I just sipped tea. I didn't need breakfast. I had something better a plan. That night, I opened my laptop. The house was dark. I heard the soft hum of the dishwasher. The click of keys was the only sound that belonged to me. I emailed the lawyer, Mr. Hutchinson. I'm ready. Let's begin the transfer. I'd like to arrange a quiet exit, and I'd like to do it with dignity. He replied within hours. Of course, Mrs. Carter. Everything is prepared. Just say when. I wasn't Margaret Carter, the quiet house guest, anymore. I was Margaret Whitmore, heiress, survivor, strategist. I didn't leave the next morning, or the one after that. Instead, I went about my days as usual, except now I documented everything. Sarah's sarcastic remarks, David's polite dismissals, the way Emma stopped hugging me because Mommy says I'm too old. I didn't do it out of vengeance. I did it to remember, to never forget that I didn't imagine it, that the hurt was real, and that I had the right to walk away. I'm your stem one assistant. Then came the final straw, a casual Tuesday dinner. I had made meatloaf Robert's favorite, the same recipe I'd used for 40 years. David took one bite and put his fork down. This is kind of salty, isn't it? Sarah tasted it, waved it off. Maybe Mom's taste buds are changing. It happens when you age. The children didn't touch their plates. Jake whispered, "Can we order pizza instead?" I stood up, walked to the sink, and began washing the plates. But something inside me was no longer washing away quietly. It was boiling. That night, I packed a single suitcase, just enough for a week. I booked a first-class ticket to Charleston. Grace, the caretaker at Eleanor's old house, had already confirmed everything was ready. My future wasn't in this house. It was in the one with my name on the deed. The house was still asleep when I stepped out of my room. 6:15 a.m., Saturday. I rolled my suitcase quietly down the hallway, my shoes muffled against the carpet. The guest room was neat bed, made drawers empty, not a photo left behind. I'd taken only what belonged to me, and left behind what never did. In the kitchen, I placed a sealed envelope on the counter, written in my hand, David and Sarah. Inside the letter was short. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. I want you to know this isn't a punishment. It's a choice. A choice to stop living where I'm barely tolerated. A choice to begin again somewhere I can breathe. And at the bottom, I signed Margaret Whitmore. I didn't say goodbye to Emma and Jake. Not because I didn't love them, but because they had already been taught to live without me. Sarah made sure of that. Outside, the taxi waited. I climbed in, heart racing, not from fear, but from the taste of freedom. As we drove off, I didn't look back, because there was nothing there for me to return to. Grace was waiting for me at the airport, holding a sign that read, "Welcome home, Mrs. Whitmore." When I stepped into the Charleston sun, something in my chest loosened the weight I'd carried for 2 years, slipped off my shoulders like an old coat. "We've prepared your room," Margaret Grace said with a smile. "Seafood bisque is on the stove, and fresh flowers in the library. You didn't have to go through all that trouble." "You're not trouble," she replied. "You're home." The night I walked through my new home in awe. Every room full of warmth, full of intention, full of beauty, and not a single voice telling me I was in the way. I stood in the garden inhaling the scent of magnolia and fresh soil. Somewhere nearby, a wind chime sang softly. I was alone, but I was not lonely. I was free. David found the letter at 8:02 a.m. He'd just gotten back from a morning jog, earphones still hanging around his neck, sweat cooling on his skin. He read the envelope, opened it. His face changed. "Sarah," he called out. "She's gone." Sarah rushed in. "Gone where I don't know." "But—" "She left a letter. She called herself Whitmore." What? Sarah blinked. "Who's Whitmore?" They called my phone, straight to voicemail. Then they checked the guest room. Empty. The fridge. The pancake batter was still in a bowl untouched. The house smelled like quiet. For the first time, David felt it. She's not coming back. That evening I called Mr. Hutchinson. "Everything went according to plan," I said. "They didn't fight it. They didn't see it coming." He laughed softly. "You left like a queen." "No," I replied. "I left like a woman who finally remembered her worth." 3 days after Mom's disappearance, David's mobile lit up at 9 a.m. "This is Michael Rodriguez from First National. Mr. Carter, I regret to inform you your home equity line of credit is being called in. Full balance, $127,000, due in 30 days. David's coffee went cold. "You can't. We've never missed a payment. Your household income changed when Mrs. Carter moved out. She isn't on the loan. Her listed contribution was part of your debt-to-income ratio. Good day, sir." He hung up, pulse hammering. That afternoon, a second call arrived from their credit card issuer. "Your minimum payment will triple next cycle. Elevated risk flag." At 5 p.m., the mortgage company emailed payment refused insufficient funds. Sarah found David hunched over spreadsheets, face ashen. "What's happening?" "Everything," he whispered. "Everything is happening all at once." That night, Emma crept downstairs, hearing muffled shouting. "We can't refinance Sarah, our score's tanked." "Then call your mother." "She won't answer." She signed the letter, Whitmore. "I don't even know what that means." Emma clutched her sketchbook, eyes wide. The security of childhood cracked a little. The next morning, David rummaged through the guest room closet, now empty save for an old shoebox. Inside, photocopies of Eleanor Whitmore's will, a property deed on Rainbow Row, and brokerage statements worth millions. Sarah gasped. She was rich. David's stomach dropped. All this time we treated her like a debit card, and she was a bank. David dialed the lawyer's number he found on the deed. "Mr. Hutchinson speaking." "I'm Margaret Carter's son, David. We need to reach her. Mrs. Whitmore is unavailable. We're facing foreclosure. Please tell her we're sorry." Long pause. "Mr. Carter, your mother anticipated this. Her instructions. I hope they learn to solve problems they created." "Good day." The line clicked dead. Sarah slammed the papers onto the table. We have 27 days. You call her again, David. She won't talk. Then we fly to Charleston and say what? Remember the chair we folded away? The meal we mocked? Could you bail us out? Tears burned his eyes, not just fear, but shame. That pung word spread. Sarah's parents declined Sunday dinner. They too had co-signed nothing and wanted no part of the implosion. Abandonment felt contagious. Bedtime, Emma whispered. Daddy, is Grandma mad at us? David swallowed. Grandma needed her own house. Will she still come to my art show? David couldn't answer. His silence was louder than any lie. With credit frozen, they sold jewelry, electronics, anything liquid. The pawnbroker counted bills slowly. Each click sounded like judgment. Total $2,400. David laughed, hollow cracked. That won't pay a week's interest. At 3 a.m., David sat in the quiet living room foreclosure notice in hand moonlight, spilling over the empty chair, Mom's chair. Only now did he notice how empty the house felt, without the click of her knitting needles, the smell of cinnamon rolls. I drove her out, he whispered. We both did, Sarah said from the hallway. Her voice broke. What do we do now? David breathed long and shaky. First, stop pretending this is anyone's fault but ours. Second, call. The bank at dawn, beg for hardship, forbearance. Third, drive to Charleston. Not to ask for money, but to beg for forgiveness. He walked to the closet and pulled out the folded chair. Set it back at the table. We start by keeping a seat for her, whether she ever returns or not. Now, 24 days until foreclosure. David packed the minivan with suitcases, overdue notices, and a single folded chair, their silent confession. Sarah rode shotgun, eyes fixed on the GPS arrow crawling east. Emma and Jake dozed in the back. Anxiety had worn them out. No one dared say we're going to beg. They said we're going to talk. But every mile felt like an admission of guilt. Charleston's pastel facades glowed under late afternoon sun. Then there it was, a 3-story yellow mansion with wrought iron balcony, blue shutters, and a brass plaque, Whitmore House, Est. 1879, Emma whispered. Grandma lives here. Jake answered what the adults wouldn't. Grandma's rich. David's fingers tightened on the steering wheel. They rang the bell. A graceful woman in her 50s opened Grace. You must be the Carters. Mrs. Whitmore anticipated your arrival. Her politeness was a velvet rope, welcoming yet firm. She'll see you alone first. She motioned only David forward. Sarah protested. We're family. Grace met her eyes. Family is why she's willing to listen, not why she'll indulge disrespect. Sarah fell silent. Tall shelves, soft lamp glow scent of old leather. Margaret sat in a high back chair, teacup steady, poised, different. David stood like a schoolboy. David voice cracking. Mom, sorry. Silence. David, we treated you like an obligation, not a blessing. We lost sight of love. Margaret set her cup down. Margaret. Love is never lost, David. It's either honored or ignored. You ignored it. He nodded, tears surfacing. David. Not here to ask for money. The bank might take the house, so be it. We need your forgiveness more than we need that roof. Margaret's eyes softened, but boundaries remained like the carved mahogany desk between them. Margaret gestured to an envelope on the desk. Inside is a rental agreement for one of my small cottages, not this house. Terms: you pay modest rent, maintain the property, attend monthly family dinners here, where respect is non-negotiable. No loans, no bailouts. Earn your balance back. David opened the envelope. Affordable, but not free. David, we accept, Margaret. One more clause: family therapy. I'll cover sessions for the children's sake. David exhaled relief mixing with humility. Elm? Go 6. Facing Sarah, Grace escorted Sarah into the library. She clutched Jake's hand. Emma trailed with her sketchbook. Sarah's rehearsed speech collapsed under Margaret's calm gaze. Sarah, Margaret. I let fear turn into control. I'm sorry. Margaret. Fear is understandable. Control is a choice. Make better choices. Jake tugged Margaret's sleeve. Jake, Grandma, can I still have your pancakes? Margaret knelt smiling. Saturday morning's my kitchen. Deal. Jake beamed. Emma offered her sketchbook. I drew your garden from the street. Margaret's eyes glistened as she flipped the pages: Magnolia's fountain, a bright yellow house, and a tiny 5th chair drawn at a dinner table. You remembered my seat, she whispered. Emma nodded. It belongs there. That evening, Grace set the dining table 5 places, and an extra folded chair leaned against the wall, reminder of past neglect. Margaret served shrimp and grits. The aroma carried memories of love, not duty. During dessert, David stood. Mom, may I bring the chair? Margaret nodded. He unfolded it beside her seat, then sat in it. To remember where you used to stand, and where you belong now. The gesture wasn't perfect, but it was honest. Later, Margaret guided David along rose paths Eleanor once tended. This house survived hurricanes, wars, and family squabbles. It stands because each generation learned humility. David inhaled jasmine. I want to learn, Mom. Teach me. Start with listening. She paused, letting night insects fill the silence. And remember, wealth isn't dollars. It's dignity. Guard it. The next Saturday, Jake's nose led the way down the stairs. It's her pancakes, he shouted. The kitchen was alive, butter, sizzling syrup, warm Margaret in her apron, humming softly. Emma placed the extra fork at the 5th seat. No one dared remove it. Monday morning, the 5 of them sat in Dr. Hawthorne's office walls, soft green, a tissue box already half used. Why are we here? Sarah asked. To learn how not to repeat the past, the therapist replied. Jake fidgeted. Emma doodled silently. David stared at the carpet. Margaret smiled gently, because even broken things deserve a second chance if someone's willing to glue the pieces. 3. Emma speaks. Halfway through, Emma raised her hand like in school. Can I say something? Dr. Hawthorne nodded. I didn't like when Mommy said Grandma should be quiet. I liked her stories. Sarah looked away. David swallowed hard. Margaret simply reached over and held Emma's hand. Nerd. Later that week, Margaret found Sarah in the garden shed, crying. I wasn't ready to be a mom, she admitted. I thought control meant safety. I pushed everyone, including you. Margaret handed her a handkerchief. You're still here. That means you want to change. Sarah nodded. I don't know how to fix it. Then we learned together. Tainem. At the local market, Margaret ran into Lena, her college roommate from decades ago. Margie Carter. Now it's Whitmore, she smiled. You look powerful. They hugged. Still bake lemon pie, Lena teased. Every Sunday. Lena looked over at Emma and Jake holding baskets. You got another shot at joy, huh? Yes, Margaret replied. And I don't intend to waste it. Emma's school hosted an art showcase. One piece had judges whispering a drawing of a yellow house with 5 chairs, a rose garden, and a tall woman holding hands with a little girl. It was titled, "My Grandma Saved Us." When they announced the winner, Emma's face lit up. She ran into Margaret's arms. Sarah cried. David clapped longer than anyone. Margaret realized she wasn't just a survivor. She was now a legacy bearer, showing her grandchildren what love with boundaries looked like. Emma no longer whispered. Jake stopped asking permission to hug. The house began to echo again, this time with laughter. And in the shed, that old folded chair, David sanded it down, repainted it, hung it above the fireplace with a brass plate reserved for her. So, on a crisp Thursday morning, Grace handed Margaret a cream envelope. Inside, a handwritten letter from the Charleston Women's Civic Forum. Dear Mrs. Whitmore, we followed your story through the community art exhibit. Your granddaughter's piece moved us deeply. We believe your voice as a woman mother and survivor deserves a platform. Will you be our keynote speaker at next month's Generations of Grace gathering? Margaret read it twice, then quietly smiled. That evening she gathered old journals, newspaper clippings, even Jake's crayon drawings of their garden. The speech she crafted wasn't polished, but it was raw, real. I'm not an expert. I've only lived long enough to know the cost of silence and the freedom of reclaiming your voice. David peeked into the study, seeing her practice aloud. He didn't interrupt, just stood there, eyes moist, hand over heart. The event was held in the Charleston Conservatory. White pillars, rows of chairs, and a golden lectern. Emma clutched Margaret's hand backstage. You're not nervous, right? Only about making it through without crying? She winked. Good afternoon. My name is Margaret Whitmore. But for many years, I was Mom, Grandma, and sometimes the woman in the way. I lost my name in serving others, but I found it again when I walked away. Not in anger, but in truth. Walking away isn't easy, especially when you're taught that endurance equals love, but love has boundaries. And sometimes, love walks. I walked into healing, into legacy, into becoming someone my grandchildren now look up to, not because I gave endlessly, but because I finally gave to myself. Silence fell, then a standing ovation led by Emma and Jake. Attendees gathered around women in their 30s, widows in their 70s, students in awe. Each had a version of her own story. One whispered, "Thank you. I didn't know I could choose myself." Margaret shook hands, shared smiles, offered tissue. But her favorite moment, a teenager in jeans, tears streaming, asked, "Will you be my grandma too?" That weekend, Emma presented Margaret with a new drawing, her standing tall on stage, surrounded by hearts and bold letters. My grandma, she saved herself and then saved us. 10 years had passed. Emma, now 17, returned home from her college orientation, looking for an old scrapbook. In the attic, she found a cedar trunk labeled "To Emma and Jake, when you're ready." Inside, family photos, the famous sketchbook, yellowing recipes, and one envelope sealed in red wax. On the front, "From Grandma Margaret with all my love." Emma sat by the window and read aloud. My dearest grandchildren, if you're reading this, you're old enough to know that love is not always sweet. It is not always soft. But when it's real, it teaches you how to stay and how to leave. I once stayed too long where I should have spoken. I once left too late when I should have walked away earlier. But it's never too late to start again. And never too late to become the version of yourself that your younger self would be proud of. I was once treated like I didn't matter, like my time, my thoughts, my heart were footnotes. But the day I folded up my chair and walked away wasn't the end. It was the beginning. I built a new life, not from money, but from boundaries. And from those boundaries, your parents rebuilt our family. Emma looked down. A tear dropped onto the page. Jake, if you're reading this and still leaving your socks on the floor, I forgive you, but your future spouse might not. Emma, if you ever feel too quiet in a room full of noise, remember, even the sun rises slowly, but nothing starts without it. You come from a line of women who refuse to disappear. You come from love, even when it got messy. If life hands you silence, speak. If it gives you a door knock. And if you ever lose yourself, remember where the fifth chair is. It waits for you. I wait for you. With all my love, Grandma Margaret. That night, Emma placed the letter back into the trunk, closed the lid, and whispered, "I'll find the fifth chair, I promise." She returned downstairs, where David now laughed louder, where Sarah asked before interrupting, where love had become deliberate. Warm calm with gentle pauses. Sometimes it takes walking away to finally be seen. Sometimes it takes folding your chair to be invited to the table again with respect. Margaret's story is not just about a mother reclaiming her voice. It's about every person who's ever been told they're too much, too old, or not needed. Thank you for staying with us until the very last frame of this story. Sometimes the silence of an empty chair echoes more than 1,000 words. This isn't just Margaret's story. It's the untold story of countless mothers and grandmothers who love quietly, give everything, and are often overlooked in the very homes they built. But every neglect, every wound can heal with awareness, gratitude, and timely kindness. If this story moved you or reminded you of someone who's given quietly for your sake, pick up the phone. Say thank you. Show up before it's too late. Because that chair, when reserved with love, becomes a timeless symbol of unconditional care. See you in our next story. Don't forget to subscribe and walk this journey of healing with us. Stay safe and stay kind.